10 coats of paint stained in tobacco.
Well, good afternoon. This is the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. And we've got a SITREP for you from Iran and got a couple experts on today. I think it'll be very informative. We're going to do the second and third order effects, or at least what we believe to be the second and third order effects from this war and the attack on Iran by the United States and Israel. So the Islamist IED attack in New York City might be one of those secondary effects. The ground troops possibly going to Iran. There's a lot of speculation about that. In fact, really pretty thin speculation so far. Oil prices and gas prices, of course, those things always come up in times such as these. And then what's the plan? Is there mission creep already? We will have highlights in quite lengthy portions of the pressers given by President Trump, as well as Pete Hegseth and Raisin Kane coming up. And I think that I kind of want to air them out a little bit so you get a full feel of how these guys think and how they conduct themselves. If you don't watch pressers, I'm kind of a sucker for them. And I like to watch them because I feel like I learn something more. I like to see the room. I like to see who's in the room. I want to know what they're wearing. Seriously, I'm not even kidding. There are a variety of things that you can gather from watching the scene in the room, who's on the wings and all of that. And I find it all fascinating. And I think it's important. Now, coming up in just a few minutes, Rich Goldberg of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies is going to be here. I heard him on a podcast, and terrific podcast, and they're from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and it was recommended by Hugh Hewitt, a person I absolutely adore. And so we are going to have him on. It's awesome. I listened to that particular podcast. I heard him on. I went, that's the guy I want. And then I found out about him because obviously he's an expert. So right on. Okay, so we're going to discuss those things, what's going on in this Iran SITREP today, to wit, the fallout. What conceivably could be the fallout from this effort. And one of the persons I asked to come on to the program today? Jake Lang. And now Jake Lang's come on the program before and several times in the past. He's a J6er. He's a guy who got arrested. He was in, that's right, President Taft. Yeah, my husband's side of the family is connected. Yeah, President Taft. You can call me President Taft too if you want. No, just kidding. But yeah, he is his dad and his father and his great grandfather were cousins of William Howard Taft, and indeed his great grandfather. What happened was he was killed in a lightning strike. And so at some point in William Howard Taft's, who was an amazing, exceptional person, by the way, his resume and his biography, there is mention of his cousin who died in a lightning attack. And of course, then we connected the dots and all that stuff. Correction, my sister-in-law connected the dots. Okay, so lots to talk about today. And as I say, the immediate fallout is that there was a terror attack in New York City over the weekend. I think it was Saturday. And it was because, Jake Lang got in touch with me. I'm on his email or text thread. And he says, well, we're going to have a anti-Islamist whatever in front of Gracie Mansion in New York City on Saturday. And I thought, well, this sounds interesting. I have no idea what's going to happen as a result of this. But so what we found out was there was a terrorist attack. And what's really disheartening, and indeed it should be totally predictable, frankly, is Zoran Mondami, the mayor of New York, came out and said it was all because Jake Lang's people were there. And it was because of this white supremacist anti-Islamist. Now, mind you, being anti-Islamic is not the same as being anti-Muslim. There is a distinction. You're not Islamist if you're just merely Muslim, but if you're a jihadist, all jihadists are Muslim, okay? But not all Muslims are jihadists. And so just bear that in mind when I say Islamist. And I know that Jake Lang is not a fan of Islam, obviously. And that is to say Islamists, which are radical people who believe in jihad. And by the way, jihad is just supposedly a lifelong journey to learn and all that jazz. But problem is there are some people for whom it takes on violent tendencies, like these dudes who were ISIS people, these besotted ISIS guys who came to the protest or whatever it was. It was a peaceful protest. There's not one out of line individual with Jake Lang that day. And here's what happened.
You don't get to come from outside and then tell everyone else.
Yo, this nigga threw a bomb, bro. Yo, he threw a bomb. Yo, did he throw a bomb, bro?
Nice.
That shit stinks. That shit stinks.
Yeah,
Yo, did he just throw an Allah Akbar bomb, bro? Yo, that shit stinks. You know damn well that wasn't me, though. That was crazy. He threw an Allah Akbar cocktail at y'all. That was some wild shit, bro. And y'all saying them.
Okay, so it was an Allah Akbar bomb. And there was a guy, it's insane, actually. And this guy comes up behind that particular individual and throws a bomb. It was an IED. And
come from outside and then tell everyone
watch this. That guy right there.
This nigga threw a bomb, bro.
Completely peaceful.
Yo, he threw a bomb. Yo, did he throw a bomb, bro?
Nice.
That shit
Yeah, he
stinks.
threw a bomb.
That shit stinks. Yo, did he just throw an Allah Akbar bomb, bro? Yo, that shit stinks. You know damn well that wasn't me, though. That was crazy. He threw an Allah Akbar cocktail at y'all.
That guy's pretty cool for almost having bombed with an IED that contained shrapnel, which included, well, let's just show you a picture of what it included. I'm sure it was just entirely peaceful screws and nails that, had it exploded, would have been sending shrapnel that would maim and murder other people in the crowd. Now, you can choose to do a couple of different things here. You can go and observe to see what Jake Lang and his friends, this anti-Islamist gathering, would do. Or you can get together with your guys that have been online and have radicalized you and decided that you're going to make bombs and bring them, two of them, and bring them to the peaceful protest and then throw them in an attempt to maim and murder people. That is what they chose to do. They chose to do that. So they had plenty of time, I guess. I only heard about it like the day, 2 days before. So I don't know where these guys got their info, but nevertheless, they prepared themselves, self-radicalized from mom and dad's $2.5 million home in nearby hinterlands and then brought the bomb with them. And lest you think that these guys didn't know each other, notwithstanding what the attorney said, just know this: the attorney was wrong.
They're from different parts of Pennsylvania. They're in different age groups. They are not known to each other. They did not live.
He's talking about the fact that this 18 and 19-year-old didn't know each other. And that's why whoever put this up, I can't remember who did this. I think there are watermarks on this. They have this picture below of them eyeballing each other when they get there. I mean, they're just like, okay, I got you. Here we are.
Together, they do not have family or school ties. There is no reason to believe they knew each other prior to this incident, and I don't know how well they knew each other at the time of this incident.
You don't know? They have nothing to play it again.
I'm saying they're from different parts of Pennsylvania, different age groups. They are not known to each other. They did not live together. They did not have family or school ties. There is no reason to believe they knew each other prior to this incident, and I don't know how well they knew each other at the time of this incident.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Sort of. I mean, that guy, he looks like he's out of central casting bad guys in some movie starring somebody in a Tom Clancy novel. So, or one of our friends, maybe one of the thriller authors that I've interviewed multiple times. So, yeah. So okay, we've got lots of Quran messages here. Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Rick writes, "Karma's a bitch. We don't know what you mean by that. Who's getting the karma?" And I don't know. Well, here's what happened at the same news conference. We know 2 men were there. 2 bombs were thrown. This is what Zoran Mandami had the temerity to say.
Protests rooted in white supremacy entitled "Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City."
Sounds legit to me. Nobody wants the Islamists to take over New York City, especially after one that had been targeted by Islamists. How many years ago? 25 years ago? Come on, man.
I'm the first Muslim mayor of our city.
Yeah, big deal.
Anti-Muslim
So what?
bigotry is nothing new to me, nor is it anything new for the 1 million or so Muslim New Yorkers who know this city as our home. While I found this protest appalling, I will not waver in my belief that it should be allowed to happen.
Good for you, Zoran. Welcome to America.
Ours is a free society where the right to peaceful protest is sacred. It does not belong only to those we agree with. It belongs to everyone. I will defend that right every day that I am mayor, even when those protesting say things that I abhor. Let me also be clear about something else. New York City will never tolerate violence, whether from protests or counter-protests.
There was no violence on one side of this protest and counter-protest things. Guess which side didn't have the violence? No, you guessed.
Many of the counter-protesters met this display of bigotry peacefully, with a vision of a city that is welcoming to all. But a few did not. 2 men, Amir Balat and Ibrahim Kayumi.
And we find, watch this. Amir Balat and Ibrahim, whatever his last name is, from Pennsylvania.
Traveled from Pennsylvania and attempted to bring violence to New York City. They are suspected of coming here to commit an act of terrorism. There is video of these 2 individuals throwing 2 devices towards the protest. The police department has determined that these were improvised explosive devices made to injure, maim, or worse. Thanks to the swift and decisive actions of NYPD officers at the scene, both men were immediately taken into custody.
So Mr. I Hate Cops gives the cops their due for having gotten them on the ground. This guy says when they thought the perps were white, they blasted their race, and in this case, religion, all over the place. But as soon as it was determined the perps were not white Christians, there was zero reference to their religion or race. For decades, Muslims who believe the most radical parts of the Quran have used the threat of Islamophobia to quell dissent. Useful idiots like Democrat socialist politicians are their enablers. God bless our troops, Israel, and President Trump. Right on with your bad self. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. By the way, did you know that Islamophobia is a word that CARE came up with, the Council on American Islamic Relations? Yeah. Anyway, so that's used as a scythe. It's right at the neck of the person who dares say anything untoward about militant Islam. I have satanic eyes. Okay, fella. Okay, Esquire Carr. Good for you. Thank you. I guess. Here, will this get away? Will that take away all the bad juju from these satanic eyes if I get my Christian cross out? Yeah. Thank you, Blink Trump. Yeah, we have lots of, we do in our SITREP today, we have lots of information. Now, let's do a couple of things. He was asked, we are going to go into depth more in a little while, Donald Trump's news presser yesterday, as well as the Secretary of War, and the person in charge of the Joint Chiefs. And we're going to do that a little bit later. But here is a highlight from one of President Trump's comments that he made to a reporter who asked him a question about sleeper cells.
Inside the U.S., there's reports that they have pressed that trigger button to activate those cells, at least abroad.
Well, they've been trying for a long time. We've been very much on top of it. One of the things we have to do is get the Democrats to stop the Democrat shutdown, because, as you know, the apparatus that looks into that, Schumer and the Democrats have shut it down, which tells you they probably hate our country a lot. But the Democrats have to open that up. But we've got very, very good intelligence into that. We know a lot of different things that have happened that have been very bad. A lot of them came in during the Biden open border period, but we have them under, we've got them, we're watching every single one of them. Yeah, we know a lot about them. The biggest problem we have is the Democrat shutdown. We know a lot about them, but the shutdown doesn't allow us to.
Okay. And then he went on from there. Okay, fair enough. The shutdown continues of DHS and TSA and other things that are not fully funded right now, because the Democrats have decided that they're going to make the president pay for the ICE officers, who are, by the way, fully funded through 2019 or 2029. And so they were wearing masks, and that we shan't have that. Of course, they'll let Antifa and these Islamist crackpots do this, but wear masks and stuff. But and there, of course, there's narcotic street team people, and there are other individuals that they depend on for their safety. However, ICE, not so much. So that's why they're doing this shutdown. That I'm going to get a chance later on this week to find out how the TSA is doing with this, and I'll let you know when we get back next week when I talk about that. We also, coming up on Thursday, we have our Epstein Thursday. It's going to be a doozy. I'm going to just tell you, it's going to be a doozy. Man. Yeah. All right. So there are a lot of things that we don't know about, okay, with respect to what's going on in Iran today. We do know that Pete Hegseth said today, this morning at dark 30, that on my time zone, that this is going to be the biggest day of bombing and action operations in Iran since the beginning of this operation with Israel against the mullahs and all the crazy people running Iran, crazy like a fox. And now we're going to find out exactly what that means. And Rich Goldberg is a gentleman who's with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. And thank you so much. I heard you on the podcast, and I just said, I want that guy. I want to talk to that guy. And then I found out how popular you are. And I thought, well, huh. So thanks for coming on to in the cheap seats, man. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I need to introduce you to my wife. You need to repeat all that for her. But yeah.
Oh, okay. He's great.
Yeah.
He's fantastic. It's all worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so lots of things I want to ask about, but I know that they've been Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, and the rest of the decision makers, Rubio and Dan Kane, are all being criticized for failing to enunciate what the outset, what our objectives are, even though I've got sound bites that I can play, to say that they announced all of their goals, the three major goals today in their different pressers over the last 24 hours. But what do you think the end game is here, and what would that look like?
Yeah, really important, I think, to sustain political support for a major military operation, to be very clear on the objectives here. And there may be reasons at different points where your strategic communications is being offered with an audience that's not necessarily us sometimes, but sometimes the enemy, and for some sort of strategic effect. But I think it's pretty clear if you look from all of the statements that the president made before this operation kicked off, all the statements he's made during the operation, the statements from Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, General Kane, it boils down to this. Number one, first and foremost, destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran's capabilities to wage war against the United States, against our partners and allies, against global energy infrastructure and movement of tankers in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, not allow them to hold the world hostage, to terrorize the world, and to use lethal weapons potentially of mass destruction, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, and potentially nuclear weapons in the future to hold us hostage to all of those things that you now see on display right now and what they're doing to try to defend themselves wildly. And so if you look at that from a progress report, from a scorecard, with the daily updates that you're getting out of the Pentagon and what we are targeting in Iran, it's pretty clear we are targeting not just their current stockpiles of all of those missiles and drones and naval threats and all the different ways in which they try to hold us hostage and blackmail us and potentially reach out and touch us now and potentially in the future. But also, as General Kane said today, and what you talked about in the lead up of this, apparently going to be a largest day of bombing, General Kane talked about the industrial base behind those missile programs and drone programs, making sure it's not just, we're mowing the lawn, as used to be said in the Middle East when the Israelis would just strike every 6 months some Hezbollah targets or Hamas targets, and they grow back, right? You're actually pulling the weeds out of the grass by their roots. We're talking about not being able to reconstitute overnight, in a month, in 2 months, even in a year, 2 years. All of those missile programs that potentially threaten the United States. Remember, they have an active intercontinental ballistic missile program that they've been working on to take their what's currently called intermediate range ballistic missiles that can go to Europe and be able to reach the continental United States. We want to destroy all of it, tear it out by its roots. And it sounds like we're doing tremendous damage to their ability to launch what they currently have by targeting launchers in addition to missile stockpiles and drones, but also now uprooting the industrial base so they can't rebuild the manufacturing capacity for all of that. And then there's one other piece here that we really haven't heard a lot about in a little while, and it clearly is hanging over all of this, and that is the actual nuclear threat. And we know there are sites in Iran that we've had our eye on where potentially the Iranians were moving very quickly to reconstitute nuclear capabilities, crossing red lines that may have triggered this entire action, in addition to what they were doing on missiles and the mass slaughter of their population. Sites that are potentially buried deep underground, sites that may still have high-enriched uranium there that we want to make sure gets out of the country and not left in the hands of these crazy radical mullahs. And so that's still a chapter we haven't seen play out yet. It makes sense to start with their air defense capabilities, their missile capabilities, their naval capabilities, their drone capabilities, because it means when we are trying to get forward into the country to attack their nuclear threat, they won't be able to challenge the U.S. military. They won't be able to hold us hostage so that you can get farther inland and attack those threats in various ways that may be necessary. I think that's the next phase we are starting to roll into. And obviously the Israelis, our partners, they're conducting strikes all the time as well. And that's sort of the other piece where people, I think, get confused. Is this a regime change operation? Is this a regime collapse operation? Are we just after the military threats? Clearly, there's also punishment being done and a lot of destruction to the internal apparatus, the ability of the regime to wage war against its own people. And what may come next from that, I don't think we can predict. But there's clearly a lot of targets being hit of the command, control, communication, and physical regime apparatus to control the population as well.
Because we have so many people, we do Epstein Thursdays on this program, and because it's a circus. I mean, it's a doggone circus. And a lot of people say this is a war of choice, a war that Donald Trump decided to go off on because he's trying to hide the Epstein files and or distract from them. It's a war of distraction, mass distraction. Would you please address this, please? I know that you've worked for Trump 45 in the National Security Council and that you've had plenty of opportunity to see him close up. And so tell me what you think about that idea, that theory.
Yeah, and I was back in Trump 47 last year setting up the new National Energy Dominance Council as well. So I have to say it's obviously preposterous. I understand there's a lot of questions and people have interest in this case, but the timeline is pretty clear here. If you look at the president moving from Operation Midnight Hammer, setting clear red lines for the reconstitution of capabilities, you then see an operation to take out one of our top foes in our own backyard in Maduro, the backyard, the playpen for the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, Hezbollah, terrorist groups, drug dealers, all in Venezuela, changing the dynamic in Latin America, and then seeing what we were able to do there with Maduro, going back to the grand strategy chessboard, understanding that the Iranians are violating our red lines on the nuclear reconstitution, violating our red lines on their missile program. And then in January, just as we're doing the Maduro operation, this historic uprising, right? The Epstein files didn't send millions of Iranians to the streets, I guarantee you. And they aren't the reason why the regime responded by slaughtering tens of thousands of Iranians in response. But what it demonstrated, I think, to the president was a historic vulnerability of the regime, at the same time, a historic breaking of every red line and racing forward with the threat to the United States. And he took action to stem that threat. And if he is successful there, which we should all be rooting for, after Venezuela, you are reshaping grand strategy vis-a-vis China and Russia very quickly.
Yeah, we're worried about what Russia's going to do, and we understand that they were on he and Trump and Putin were on the phone yesterday, and it's like, okay, well, wait a minute now. Putin's just been helping Iran, and just how does this all work?
Yeah, it's a complicated mess, frankly, in geopolitics. Iran, you're right, has been a close ally of the Russians in military cooperation, in nuclear cooperation, and of course in sanctions evasion cooperation, both countries under sanctions. Close enabler, access member with China, part of its Belt and Road Initiative, the discount gas station for China, and return the Chinese helping the Iranians build back up that missile program that we're now attacking. But you know, the Russians have a lot of other cards to play right now. They're under sanctions for their energy. They see what's happening in the oil market. Maybe Putin's trying to cut a deal. You know, maybe you back off on some oil sanctions on Russia, release more barrels of oil into the marketplace, have more relief valve and timeline to conduct operations against Iran. That could be part of Putin's calculation. Obviously, for Trump, having come in saying, hey, I want to bring this war with Ukraine to a close, I don't want either side to continue to have mass murder, you know, in the field, the killing field that have become Ukraine and Russia, of just tens of thousands of people dying, you know, almost every day. It's just wild. And obviously, with Putin being the one who refuses to come to the table, refuses to halt.
Yeah. His all of a sudden, he's on the phone with Trump. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah. So the president, I think, is pretty clear-eyed on it all. He's dealing with a specific mission right now. He has to manage the markets. But he also knows that if he relieves sanctions on Putin, his chances of bringing that war to a close on terms that benefit the United States and the West diminish. So we're all balancing those interests. Putin plays a lot of games, but in the end, he can't actually save Iran. He couldn't save Maduro. He couldn't save Bashar al-Assad in Syria. I think it actually demonstrates the weakness of the Russian hand at the moment. But we'll see how it plays out. I think the president has the global economy in mind, the oil market in mind, pricing affordability here at home, and he has to concentrate on that while achieving the strategic objectives in Iran.
The president was talking yesterday in his news conference about the Strait of Hormuz and how he wants to make sure everybody gets through there so he keep the oil flowing. And this is a big favor to China. And I'm just going, okay, would you educate me, please, to the extent that China is receiving Middle East oil? How much was that country dependent upon cut rate Iran sanctioned oil? And I don't get the point he was making about that. I mean, where's China going to get this oil if Iran's not supplying it? You know what I mean? Yeah. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does. I think the oil market's a complicated picture. It's important to sort of break it down and where it fits into the grand strategy. 20% of the world's oil comes out of the Strait of Hormuz. So that's that Middle Eastern oil right now that has a bottleneck. It's why you've seen the price volatility in the oil market. But 50% of China's imported oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Very little of our oil now comes from the Middle East because of America turning from an energy importer into an energy exporter. So the American energy dominance agenda has transformed the way that we actually move the barrels, and we don't feel a supply shock by the Strait of Hormuz shutting down. We do have price shocks because it's a global commodity of how it's sold and priced. But the Chinese have an actual supply problem right now, long term. Now, how has the Iranian piece of that played into their strategy? Well, for the last several years, they've been able to import 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day. Obviously, they get a lot from the Saudis illicitly. This is illicit oil. And they get it not just at a steep discount, but basically for free because there's no way to really pay for it except in infrastructure projects inside of Iran. And that's the payment mechanism. It's sort of a barter. So 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day go to China, fill up their own strategic petroleum reserve, along with the 500, 600,000 barrels that were coming out of Venezuela before the Maduro operation. That gives them this big reserve for times of crisis or war that they can draw down on. They're probably doing it right now, along with whatever continued illicit oil they get from Russia. But if you constrain the Strait of Hormuz, over time, that pressure continues to build for stability in Beijing because they're dependent on two things in the world. They have to import oil and they have to import food. Those are their insecurities. And right now we're at one of those critical pinch points for a communist regime that tightly controls the system and doesn't want to have a financial crisis on its hands. By the way, this is the dual-edged sword. Number one, they want to have Iran with missiles and drones and mines to threaten the United States so we never do something like this. Right. Because then the strait remains open and their oil can't be interrupted in a time of crisis with the United States. Conversely, they've given Iran the tools and helped them build up the capacity to hold their own oil hostage in the middle of this crisis. But if the United States is successful, if their ability to do this in the future is destroyed or removed, then it's actually the United States that holds the cards in the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz on their oil supply.
Well, you've looked at it from all angles, the geopolitical as well as the energy aspect of it. This is crazy. You've had a front row seat to all of this. I mean,
it's like, this is like the crisis that I was literally made for. It was an Iran file at the National Security Council and an energy file at the White House, and we've just married the two into the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. What about Pickaxe Mountain? The question here is, to what extent did we wipe out the Iran ability to create nuclear weapons in Midnight Hammer? And why is everyone so concerned, you among them, about Pickaxe Mountain? Talk to me about that, if you would, please.
So, this is really important. And I think there's valid questions as to why we didn't have that as a target back during Operation Midnight Hammer. But there's a couple things at play. Obviously, we did enormous damage to the underground enrichment facility called Fordo near the city of Qom, where we were most concerned about the enrichment of high purity uranium, high risk uranium that was almost ready to go across the nuclear threshold to weapons-grade uranium at a site that's deep, deep, deep under a mountain and very hard to penetrate. And that's why we sent the B-2 bombers with the penetrator bombs to go through the ventilation shafts and try to destroy what we could down there. There were also attacks both by the Israelis on above-ground facilities and the Americans at other facilities as well in the area that were key to their nuclear weapons complex, if you will, their enrichment facilities, their conversion facilities, their metal-making facilities, all these different parts of, let's call it the supply chain of nuclear weapons making. But there were two different pieces that really didn't get hit or didn't get hit enough. One was Pickaxe Mountain. This is a facility like Fordo that they have been working on in Iran for several years now. And construction has continued and raced forward, and they're near completion. Deep underground, deeper than Fordo, more hardened from military strikes, supposedly, according to reporting, than Fordo was, and intended to be a new enrichment facility that they would think is impervious to military intervention in the future. That site remains. It was not hit during Midnight Hammer, whether we didn't think we could do it from the air or for some reason, other reason we didn't hit it. It stands today, has to be destroyed. The second piece is the enriched uranium material itself that they had already amassed. There were a lot of reports of where that could be. Is it trapped? Is it destroyed? Does it remain? There seemed to be, and of course we don't have access to the intelligence out here, but if you read the tea leaves and read some of the reporting and sources on the record or on background, you start hearing concerns that there is some amount of highly enriched uranium material still down there in tunnels in Isfahan, and that the Iranians were close to figuring out how to access it, to take it out, mix it with newly manufactured advanced centrifuges, and go into that new Pickaxe Mountain facility, and then they could break out very quickly in a crashed nuclear program. That's one of the triggers of this operation. And so we're still waiting to see, what are we going to do there? Are we going to get that material? How are we going to destroy Pickaxe Mountain? And I think that's why the president may be hedging a little bit on saying that I won't rule out ground troops. I don't think anybody wants a ground invasion, anything like Iraq and Iran. That would be foolish for the United States. But there may be a need for special operators. There may be a need for some sort of very breathtaking commando raid that goes and gets nuclear facilities or blows them up. And we're waiting to see if that actually happens.
Well, do you think that we can get out of this thing with success without troops on the ground?
I think so. First of all, I don't think that there's support from the American public for troops on the ground. I think we would take enormous casualties. I think we play to their advantage. They'd end up in a guerrilla warfare campaign. And I think we would also ignore the natural advantage that already exists on the ground, and that is upon millions of Iranians who came out into the streets and hate the regime and are waiting for the moment where the bombs stop dropping and they get to attempt a takeover in places. So I don't see us needing to think about that. Even if the regime were to not be collapsible from just outside air power, covert activities, still the long-term ability to sustain something, to achieve some sort of objective. What exactly would the objective be we're trying to achieve? To me, the national interest at stake here, besides at least facilitating the opportunity for the Iranian people to take their country back, which remains possible, is to ensure they cannot wage war against the United States. They can't threaten us with nukes. They can't threaten us with missiles. They can't threaten us with drones or naval and mine capabilities. That is the priority, and I don't think we need ground troops for that, and I don't think anybody would support it.
President Trump yesterday, and I think Hegseth echoed it, that Iran had designs on taking over, I think was the words used, the entire Middle East. And I thinking, how? Just because they would have an ability to extort behavior from them because they have nukes, or how would that work?
Yeah, it's sort of something that was underway already. And when October 7th kicked off, the big massacre from Hamas in Israel, October 7, 2023, we saw the region light up with what the regime had built. It was called their Ring of Fire strategy, a Shia arc that could go all the way from the Mediterranean down to the Gulf and down to the Red Sea in Yemen. And what the Revolutionary Guard Corps does, especially its Quds forces, the whole ideology, the doctrine of this regime. Remember, we're not dealing with Westerners here. We're not even dealing with normal authoritarian thugs who just want to kill people and make money. These are radical Islamists with a very warped view of the world, their own religion, and what their goals are in the world. And it is to export the Islamic Revolution from 1979. And they do that first in the Middle East by developing regional proxies. We would call them terrorist groups, but they foment conflicts. They arm rebel groups. They arm militias. They then start providing them very lethal forces, missiles and drones, and all the things you see them using right now in the Gulf.
Yeah.
They've given that to the Houthis in Yemen. They've given that to Hezbollah in Lebanon. They've given that to militias in Syria and militias throughout Iraq. And then they use that to undermine the governments there that may be aligned with the United States or the Sunni Arab partners of the United States, or to attack and undermine Israel, our flagship democratic ally in the region, and then start collapsing those nation states and imposing their will inside of it, having their armed forces start taking effective control, where Lebanon starts becoming hostage to Hezbollah. And basically Hezbollah runs the state for all these years. And where in Iraq, Baghdad starts succumbing to all the military, armed, and financial pressure of Tehran. And Yemen falls apart, and the Houthis start controlling territory and then can threaten shipping lanes in the Red Sea, while Iran threatens shipping lanes in the Gulf. This picture is unsustainable for the United States because it continues to draw us in. We can't just close our eyes and say, I don't care, I'm just going to focus on China, when they start blowing things up. And they start threatening Americans, and they start threatening maritime traffic and global commerce. And I think that's what Secretary Hegseth is talking about. It was already underway.
Yeah.
It was being operationalized from the nuclear deal back in 2015 with all the money that was opened up for that. And certainly, if they do not have the capability to threaten their neighbors, to threaten maritime traffic, to export that revolution, we are a lot safer for it. And then we start to expand peaceful partnerships in the region, maybe expand the Abraham Accords, really make that region safer, more secure, and then finally really focus on where the top threat to the United States is, and that's in the Indo-Pacific.
Is this whole takeover of the Middle East area, is this the mosaic pattern that they talk about? Does that have anything to do with it, or sort of having little bits and pieces that come together as a full picture of their plans for the Middle East? Yeah,
absolutely. And you're seeing that play out right now, where they're just trying to, just attack everyone as part of this mosaic plan of just, cast their shadow over every Gulf state, every neighbor. We can hit everybody. We can hit you. We can use our proxies. We can do it ourselves. And then remember that they have operatives outside of the Middle East. They conduct terror operations, assassinations. They have a whole wing that operates in Europe, that operates in the United States, quite frankly, that operates in Latin America. And they have assets worldwide. We are on high alert here, just, Homeland Security purposes, making sure we're monitoring anybody we have suspected of being tied to the Revolutionary Guard or the Ministry of Intelligence. Obviously, they have terror proxy cells as well from Hezbollah, primarily perhaps Hamas as well in Europe, that could be activated. So this is a global threat. They are trying to hold the world hostage. They expand their empire in the Middle East to project power, give them a shield to be able to control economic flows, flows of goods and oil and energy, and then use that shield of terrorism and missiles and drones to build up the capability to wage war directly on the U.S. homeland, which is their ultimate goal. Death to America is their policy, not slogan. And they have been underway in trying to get the missile capability to do just that.
So I wonder, these are the 12ers and the, dead enders is what they're all about. Can I ask you a question about Karg Island? Is concern about Karg Island, is this?
Oh, we got a good map. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, it's getting closer. Somebody put this on the Twitters. It's pretty cool. And then I guess they Google Earthed it. It's out there for all to see.
Yeah.
You can't get internet.
Looks so small.
Yeah. You can't get internet in Iran right now unless you happen to be next to a Starlink piece of machinery or equipment, but we can get Google Earth to give you a little heads up on what's going on Karg Island. What is that anyway? What can you explain to people what this is?
Yeah, so this is strategically important to the regime. It is the primary export facility of their oil. And so there's a map you can find on FDD's website, which we can maybe send to you for show notes or something. But if you Google, energy targets or possible economic targets around FDD, you'll see a really good map that lays out where their whole oil and gas facilities are, upstream, downstream. And so you'll see where oil fields are, you'll see where refineries are, and you'll see where production facilities are, and ultimately Karg Island, where they move the oil to then load onto tankers to then export primarily to China at this point, which is the only actor that's been importing their oil. And so that's the lifeblood of the regime from a revenue perspective. It's also the potential lifeblood of a different government from a revenue perspective. Oil is the driver of their economy. Right now, it's 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day. Tankers roll into Karg Island, they load, they come out of the Strait of Hormuz, they go to China. Obviously, that traffic has slowed down a great bit, though they're trying to get their own illicit cargo out right now. If Karg Island was seized, they can't export oil. If Karg Island was destroyed, they can't export oil for a long time. Obviously, a seizure that some people have talked about raises a lot of questions like who's seizing it, how are you holding it, if the regime is still there with drones and missiles and they try to attack you, is that sustainable? Mm-hmm. Destruction, raises questions, at least right now, if you hold out hope for the regime collapsing, to have the infrastructure available to the next government in transition so you don't have chaos, you can fund the government operations. But on the flip side, if the regime is not collapsing and there's going to be a halt to operations, whether or not on the way out you would take out those facilities so that the regime can't just have a quick way to get money back and rebuild all that's been destroyed over time. Question would be, how would they retaliate long term? What does that mean for long-term security and safety of maritime traffic if we haven't wiped out all of their threat capabilities? And obviously the threat to regional energy infrastructure for the oil exports and terminals from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain. So it's a very big deal because it's all about the strategic lifeblood of this regime. Mm-hmm. If you block their oil exports, you deny them oil export revenues, they have no money. It's pretty simple long term, but the calculation of when and how, within what's going on in the oil market volatility, the threat from Iran, whether the regime stays or collapses, are all sort of open questions, which is why I think you haven't seen anything happen yet.
Oh man, I mean, we're all scared. Are you worried about? I know you have to go. So, are you worried about mission creep?
Yeah, I'm always worried about mission creep. I think we should be worried about that. But I'm not so much with this president. You can have an objective, you can try to achieve it, you can achieve as much as you can, and at some point you have a gut check of, is the next step achievable or not? We've tried. What's the best outcome here that we want to achieve that is achievable, and not allow ourselves to get into something that's endless and unachievable just because we really wanted to achieve it, but we just haven't done it yet. That's always it's always a potential thing there for presidents, military leaders, et cetera. I think this president, keenly aware of the economic impacts already over a week and a half, aware that there's always a time clock on the American people for support for military operations that keep dragging on without clear return on investment for the operation. Right now, he's producing, in my view, that return on investment for our security. If it gets to the point where we don't see major improvements, major progress in objectives, you've gotten all you can out of this type of military operation, and I think rather than move to, maybe this will work better. It wasn't part of the plan, but let's go here. I think better to sort of take a pause and say, look at what we have achieved here. We don't know how the next months will play out with such a weakened regime and Israeli covert capabilities and other things, potentially following up. The regime could still collapse a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, if they've been so severely weakened. But don't allow ourselves into mission creep. Stay with the strategic objectives, achieve them for our national security, and then find the best way forward.
Is Pahlavi the guy to help transition? Are we inviting a monarchy if we have him back, or what do you think?
I think he could be. I don't think we would be inviting a monarchy. His public statements, at least, have been he doesn't want to be a monarch. He doesn't want to be the Shah like his father. Mm-hmm. He wants to be a figurehead that has sort of a coalition that comes together and is the caretaker for a transition to a democratically elected government. He's published all kinds of papers that are actually pretty impressive and detailed on actual transition plans in the absence of anything that we've seen before. He has said he opposes things like de-Ba'athification. He would keep most of the bureaucracy's government intact to avoid chaos. It's the upper echelons of the regime that he would want to remove. There's a lot of people in Iran who support him. We saw that demonstrated during the protests. There are certainly some people who don't support him, and there's a lot of voices in the diaspora that oppose him. The MEK, which is historically a communist organization that has incredible capabilities and intelligence and has been in some ways an asset from an intelligence community perspective for all the threats that we face from the regime. At the same time, historically was designated as a terrorist organization and is not well liked by a lot of the Persian population. They want to be at the table. They're opposing Pahlavi and sort of behind a lot of the attacks on him. There are others that are non-MEK Persians, non-monarchists who don't like Pahlavi. They have voices in the mix. You have ethnic groups that want to have a say and want to have a seat at the table because they're large minorities in the country, whether it's the Kurds or the Azeris. And so this is, in some ways you could say, oh, wow, sounds like too much, too confusing. I don't know. I don't want to shake up this snow globe. I don't know what's going to turn out. The one thing I would say is widespread support among, a massive amount of the population across ethnicities, across backgrounds, religion, et cetera, for the territorial integrity of Iran. That is a starting point for a coalition to keep the country together. You can be a Kurdish leader, you can be an Azeri leader, but you want to be part of Iran, the historic Iran, Persia, right? No matter where they come from, there is this pride in most of the population of being Iranian. That's a good starting point. And I will say one interesting other factor, unlike Iraq, unlike Afghanistan, unlike some of these places in the world, the Iranians go through sham elections all the time. The regime was so smart in how they set up their apparatus to control the people. They actually hold elections. They hold elections for president. They hold elections for parliament. Now they're sham. They get to decide who's running. They end up deciding to make sure who wins, even if people voted a different way, as we saw back in 2009 on the presidential vote. But people are used to going to the ballot box and wanting to have a say and wanting to have their views across all these demographics, religious, secular, ethnic, Persian, Kurdish, Azeri. So there is an interesting cultural awareness of democracy, a very highly intellectual, Western-oriented society that wants territorial integrity despite ethnic differences sometimes. So I think those dynamics play in our favor if, in fact, we see a regime collapse or transition, and if Pahlavi can bring together a coalition of groups that get under this banner of keep Iran together, keep it moving forward, everybody has a say, let's go to an election.
Rich, thanks so much for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. I really appreciate it. And we'll push this out and maybe we'll all take heart, because I know people are getting like, mission creep, all those things. And I tend to agree with you. I don't think Trump wants to engage in that at all. So, but let's just keep a good thought. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks
Rich
for having
Goldberg.
me.
Thank you. He's with the Foundation for the Defense of Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Yeah, there you go. Here's what, there's an excellent interview that All In podcast did with Reza Pahlavi. Here's just a short little soundbite from it talking about the possibility of being instrumental in the changeover and transition for Iran. Just very quickly, listen up.
The time he took over and power was established, it was too late. And since then, we've been hostages to this regime. This time, in full transparency, the Iranian people ought to have a clear idea of different models presented to them. And on that basis, having understood every aspect of what it could be, then they make their choice. This is a process that should be totally transparent, with enough time for debating different ideas. And again, as I said, let the democratic process unfold and let the people vote in majority what is their final choice. I'm not here to determine an outcome. Again, I stress my role here is to manage this transition and create an opportunity that people have been deprived of for half a century to finally have a say as to what they would like to have for themselves.
So that full interview, you probably want to avail yourself of on the All In podcast last couple of days. It was quite an insightful interview. And, you never know if Reza Pahlavi is just an empty suit or somebody who's a deep and serious thinker. And it turns out he's pretty deep and serious. So very interesting. We'll see how that works out. I wanted to introduce you to Charles Goyette, who's a New York Times bestselling author. And he is best known for his book. It's called Empire of Lies, Fragments from the Memory Hole. And he's on the Adult in the Room podcast now. He also is worried about mission creep. And Charles Goyette, thank you so much for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. And Victoria, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a great pleasure to be here today.
I just bought the whole Iraq situation hook, line, and sinker. And it really wasn't until I talked to Sam Faddis, a CIA operator who was sent to Iraq with his ragtag team of people to find out where the WMD were. And they were still in the effort to find it when they started the invasion of Iraq. And so he goes, well, we hadn't actually found contemporaneous current WMD. We found the old stuff, and so I go, oh, well, if Sam Faddis says that, and he was the guy sent to look for it, then I think I was bamboozled.
Weren't all the American people?
Yeah, and I, we all worry about that happening again, and I know this is a worry of yours too. Tell us what you think.
Victoria, let me tell you something. Just as a spin off of what you just said, they did find the old leftover stuff. It was inert, it was worthless. It was old canisters. It was nothing.
Yeah.
And but what was that stuff that they found? Oh, I'll tell you what that stuff was. And nobody talks about this. Nobody knows about this. But Saddam Hussein was our guy. Mm-hmm. He was the CIA helped install the Ba'ath Party in Iraq. He was our guy. When he wanted to invade Kuwait, he went to the American ambassador to get a clearance, to get a thumbs up, because he was our guy. And all that awful old, certainly chemical and maybe biological weapon stuff that he was fooling around with was actually stuff that we supplemented, we underwrote for him in his war with Iran. And we helped him procure they're illegal by our own standards, weaponry to pursue that war with Iran. And I don't remember the numbers because it's so long ago, but I would guess at least 200,000 Iranians, a lot of them really young kids, were sent to the battle lines there, and they were slaughtered and they perished at the hands of all kinds of illegal weaponry. That was our stuff. That was from the United States. So I keep hearing these people that want to pursue these wars. It's almost incomprehensible, Victoria. They say, this is not a war. And then with the next breath, they say, we've been at war with Iraq for 47 years. Well, when did history start 47 years ago? We're the ones that toppled their government, their elected government, so we could steal their oil in 1953. And look, I'm not a defender of Iran, but people need to know the historical context. All of those millions of people that turned out in the street in Iran in 1979 to wish the Shah a very pleasant farewell. And I watched and I thought, what is wrong with these people? They say the great Satan, they're burning American flags. What is wrong with these people? Why did they all turn out? Well, it wasn't because life was so very good under the Shah of Iran. When the CIA installed him, and Alan Dulles, the head of the CIA, actually accompanied him when they put him in the Peacock throne. They paid off thugs in the street. They paid off mercenaries. They stole, they cheated. They funded revolutionary movements to replace the elected government with the Shah of Iran. Alan Dulles accompanied him to the Peacock throne, sort of like John Brennan showed up when we toppled the elected government in Ukraine. But why were they all so crazed? Why did I wonder as a youngster, what is wrong with these people? It wasn't because the Shah was such a beneficial, a beautiful, a liberal, enlightened ruler. And I actually wrote a story for, I believe it was in The Blaze a couple of weeks ago about his rule. The Reagan administration's historian laureate, the one that all the Reaganites loved, and they deserved to love, because a great historian was a British historian by the name of Paul Johnson. His stuff was so popular then because he actually dug in and told the truth that the Reaganites were, really interested to see. And he described, not me, not a bunch of, leftists. This is the Reagan historian laureate. He described the Shah of Iran as the Persian Stalin. And that is exactly what he was. He was brutal to his own people. Oh, I'll give you an anecdote. When Dulles put him in, he brought in with him General Schwarzkopf, not Stormin' Norman from the Gulf War, but his dad.
Oh, really?
Yes, his dad. And between his dad and the Mossad, they taught the Shah, the newly installed Shah, how to torture their own people. And it became the notorious, remembered to this day, goes down in history. It became the notorious Savak, which are known to have been some of the most brutal secret police in the world. So when all those people turned out in 1979, we didn't have a clue why they were doing it. But, the information is available to us today, and the idea of putting the Shah's heir in there. Of course, the expatriates, the guys in L.A. and Beverly Hills that were Shah, supporters and beneficiaries of his plutocracy, they all want the American people to go do their fighting for them and reinstall their old regime that the people kicked out. But the best thing of all was the elected regime a very long time ago that we should have left alone in the first place. So that's just a little bit of my backstory. And
I mean, that's a cautionary tale for sure, obviously. So what now? What do you think will happen after this? I'm hoping that whatever the outcome, the mullahs are gone and the bad actors for the past 47 years are gone, and someone who loves Persia will come in, and maybe it's Reza Pahlavi's son. I mean, I know. What do you think of that?
Well, his credentials are pretty thin, and his heredity is not the ideal for Americans to champion him. I think even the administration sort of knows that.
Yeah.
But the things with these wars, and when you ask what now, nobody can know. When conservatives used to say, "Oh, there'll be unintended consequences," well, that's exactly right. There are unintended consequences. There's second, third order results that we cannot begin to imagine. We just don't know. I mean, the administration has talked, for example, they float in all these ideas because they don't know. I saw a story, I think it was in Axios or one of those leftist places, that said, Susie Wiles in the White House, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, her hair is practically on fire. She's trying to figure out what to do about gas prices because it's going to take the Republicans in November. Of course it is. And they're going to come up with all kinds of schemes. What do we got to do to force it? Well, how about not having a war? That would have been a really good idea to keep gas prices low, which were low at the time. So they're coming up with all these ideas, trying to figure out what to do. And among them are things like, well, maybe we can well, this was a good one. Maybe we can get shipping to go back on the through the Strait now. And if Lloyd's of London thinks it's too dangerous to insure 10 million barrels of oil on a private ship, and they'll jack up their premiums, but it's still not enough for the risk involved. The president says, well, the American people, well, he doesn't put it that way. He goes, we will, meaning the government, but of course it means you and me, will guarantee their shipping. So, okay, let me understand this now. We're energy self-sufficient. We produce enough oil to keep America. So that oil that's moving through the Persian Gulf and through the Strait of Hormuz is headed to places like China, for example, big consumers of oil from the Gulf. And yet the American people are supposed to pay to ensure and protect that oil so that they can get it at below what the actual true market cost would be if they had to pay Lloyd's of London enough to insure those ships. So the American people get stuck with the bill all the time with no benefit for the American people. The oil's not coming here. It's going elsewhere. And then at the same time, Victoria, they're talking about, well, maybe, I mean, they're flailing about, literally flailing about. They're talking about, well, maybe we could introduce some troops on Karg Island and that, that'll help. You know, well, I mean, of course, I've heard that story. We've all heard that story. Oh, we'll just put a few special advisors in there, you know, and then that'll be fine. And then they say, well, maybe we'll. I think they abandoned this one. I hope they've abandoned this one. Maybe we'll subsidize the Kurds and we'll arm the Kurds, and then they can go into like northwest Iran and they could take over, and we could take advantage of the Kurds and let them die for the United States again, like they did in the past. Maybe we can do that. And I'm thinking, has anybody talked to Erdogan in Turkey about that? Because he's not going to like that very much. And that broadens the war. And he is a member of NATO, by the way. And that ends the NATO alliance, which is crumbling anyway as we speak. So all of these secondary, tertiary consequences are never thought of by these things, and it's by these people.
Are you sure they don't war game those? I would imagine they have to.
Yeah,
but so they've decided that whatever happens, if the worst happens, it's something that's doable, right? Isn't that what they're talking about?
I'm sure there are competent people at some level, maybe in the Pentagon, maybe in some of the intelligence agencies that war game this. But, you know, the American people get to war game it too. And our founders said, for good and sufficient reason, they said, actually, unlike today, you know, you can't put a lot of confidence in our leadership these days. And this has been the case for a couple of generations. The founders of America were really well read in the historical precedents. These weren't average people. They were really studied when they put the American Constitution together, American form of government. They really looked at the historical precedents. So they didn't make this stuff up. Oh, we're going to have balance of power, checks and balances. We'll give you this. We'll give you that. Oh, you have some too much. They don't have. We'll give some of this. They didn't do it that way. They looked at the precedents, and the precedent was that the executive branch, that means throughout history, kings, dukes, maybe popes, rulers, heads of state, have a propensity throughout history to engage in needless elective wars. So they said, we're going to lodge the war-making authority clearly, without question, in the representatives of the people that are expected to pay and die for those wars. And those are us. And yet we haven't had a declaration of war since World War II. Yet we've had a continuous succession of wars, failed regime change wars. But the advantage of Article 1, Section 8, a declaration of war by the people's representatives, are so many. One of them is that all of these things are contemplated in advance. We know what the objective is. It has to be stated in the declaration of war. We know what kind of resources the people were dedicating to that. We know what victory consists of, so we know what the end game is. We have that debate. And furthermore, the people that use bad judgment and vote for a bad war are known to us. And if we choose, we could retire them from office. This is self-government. We're supposed to have a government of laws, not of men. We were told that from the beginning of our history, a government of laws, not of men. And yet, you know, the Constitution and the war-making authority is honored only in the breach. And, you know, Victoria, I'm on a little bit of a book tour talking to people about Empire of Lies. And it doesn't happen often, but every now and then I get this thing. When I talk about this, they go, well, you know, maybe we should have just waited, you know, until Pearl Harbor was struck and so on. And then it took one day for the Congress to declare war on Japan after Pearl Harbor. Nobody has said that there's nothing wrong with the doctrine of hot pursuit. You get struck, of course you get struck back, but we spent weeks moving munitions and armadas to Iran. Everybody knew it was coming. There was no secret in Washington. It was well known, and yet we couldn't take a day to have a debate in Congress and have a declaration to clarify our ends. Now, by the way, this helps other people, because when you declare war, then other people in surrounding territories and allies and non-allies and suppliers of goods, they all of a sudden understand this isn't just tiddlywink, this is a war. And if you do this if you provide these resources or this help to our enemies, if you're a domestic, if you're an American, you're a citizen, then that's treason. And you know the statutes say death is the penalty for treason. But there is no declaration of war. We don't have an enemy. Believe it or not, we don't have an enemy. And why? Well, the president can't just wake up in the morning and say, I don't like Bolivia today, or I'm mad at Greenland, and they're our enemy. It doesn't work that way. If you're gonna specify an enemy and put everybody on notice, don't provide them resources, don't help them, because you'll be committing a treason. Then you have to have a declaration. Otherwise, everything is foggy and autocratic, and we're a self-governing people in this country.
Empire of Lies, and the subtitle is Fragments from the Memory Hole. Charles Goyette, thank you so much for coming on. And I appreciate you spending some time with us and just bringing up another idea about this. We should not just be going all whole hog and go marching on to war. I mean, we're already in one. So I hope that we can get out of it and something can be done to run that country, because I don't want us doing it. But there
I
you
keep
are.
saying, as I watch Fox News at night, I keep saying, we ought to tape this and play it back in 6 months. And nobody will believe what they've said to us.
Oh, yeah. Just like all the old Iran or Iraq war. tapes.
Syria.
Yeah.
I know you're trying to close off because you have to move on. But I just want to say this, just to clarify this stuff for people.
Sure.
We had to topple Assad in Syria. Nobody understood why. He'd liberalized the way. I mean, if the dear leader in Korea had liberalized his country the way that Assad Jr. did, we'd proclaim it a miracle. But whatever, he had to go. And so we had the Pentagon giving resources to Islamic fundamentalists in Syria to fight with Islamic jihadists that were funded by the CIA. We were funding both sides of the deal. That's good if you're an arms merchant. It's not so good for the American people. They have to pay for it. And we installed a guy by the name of al-Shara. And who is al-Shara? Al-Shara, until like 18 months ago, he's a bin Ladenite. He's an al-Qaeda ISIS guy. He had the United States State Department put a $10 million bounty on his head for his crimes and his terrorism. The U.S. did, the State Department did, $10 million bounty. And now we ushered him in to run the country. And a friend of mine, Daniel McAdams, said, they trimmed his beard and gave him a $90,000 Swiss watch. And now he's this great enlightened ruler, and he's feted at the White House. I mean, how many times do these things have to go on until the American people begin to understand that we've been played by this stuff?
Okay, I have a question for you before you go.
Yeah.
And you brought up arms merchants, and they're, of course, it is widely believed that Jeffrey Epstein was the financier of a lot of different arms and all sorts of other things.
Pardon me, Victoria. Is Jeffrey who? I don't remember that name. It was a kind of front and center for so long, and now all of a sudden it disappeared. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're with those. You're with a lot of our viewers who think that. And by the way, I'm conservative. I like Trump. I voted for him 3 times. So however you may feel about that, I'm still not crazy about the war. I feel like the Iranians, of course, the mullahs need to be deposed. That's just me, maybe. But anyway, but I just wanted to get your feel, because you're a guy you look at all this stuff, you're sort of looking into important issues. Do you think that he was a financier for the CIA and other intelligence agencies?
He was so tied in, and I have tried to follow it very, very closely, because that's what I do for a living. And even I haven't unraveled it all. And every time we get a new disclosure, there's a new surprise. But I mean, clearly he was tied into intelligence agencies, into the CIA, maybe MI6, certainly the Mossad. He was tied into intelligence agencies. Clearly he was laundering money. Mm-hmm. Clearly he was ingratiating himself with the establishment, the governing classes of America and the Western world to further his own ends. Clearly he was happy to see war fomented. I remember seeing the one that said, this Iraq thing, that'll be great for, there'll be a lot of business opportunity there. That's great. Well, it's not so great for the people that get killed on both sides, and for the American people that get bled dry by this stuff. We're already broke. I mean, we have a we have a visible debt of $39 trillion, $39 trillion that we can't pay. We can't pay it. And, we can try to borrow it from people, but all of our creditors overseas are backing away. The Chinese used to loan us, at one point, it was almost $1.4 trillion. They're down in half now.
Bring on the tariffs.
Don't want to loan us money.
Bring on the tariffs.
They know what's happening, though, and that's why they're stampeding out of the U.S. dollar, and central banks are buying gold. But we can't pay it, and the only way that we can pay that debt is to print the money. And yet, the American people are suffering. There's an affordability crisis, and the American people are suffering. And yet, we spend $1 trillion a year on the war machine today, and yet now we have to. Trump asked for a $50 billion supplemental the other day, and not only that, we're spending more than the next, 7, 8, or 9 nations, whatever it is, combined on warfare. And not only that, He said $1 trillion a year isn't enough. We want to boost it to $1.5 trillion a year, to boost it by another $500 billion. It's absolutely crazy. We can't pay back the debt. The American people are, trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And yet the spending goes on nonstop, and you're a conservative. Great. I used to be a conservative when I relied on them, but there is no fiscally conservative coalition in Congress anymore. If they say they're conservatives, I guarantee you, maybe one or two exceptions, they're not conservative about our money. They don't want to cut spending. They don't want to rein in the government. They don't. Oh, Victoria, they don't want to release the names of who's getting of the slush fund in Congress,
right.
The slush fund that pays off people who have charges of sexual harassment against the elected officials. They don't want you to know about that, but they'll use your tax money to pay those people off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just shameful. And the American people aren't told that. We go through this, they say, oh, the vote went down. That's too bad. Nancy Mace says that's a shame, but nobody really frames it that, this is money coming out of your pocket, out of my kids' education and stuff, to a slush fund so that Congress can pay off, Harvey Weinstein or whoever it is that's charging them. And we don't know who the guilty parties are. We can't run them out of office because they won't tell us. I mean, it's just shameful what's going on. We've got to take this country back.
Yeah. Charles Goyette, thank you so much. His book, Empire of Lies. You might want to get that for yourself. Thank you again. I appreciate your time today. Okay. Well, so we've had two completely different viewpoints, I think, of this Iran. What did Trump call the other? What do you call it? I'll think of whatever, somebody. No, Trump has not spent the money. Of course, the Supreme Court decision just recently in the IEPA decision is going to hold in abeyance the payments. And now we've got 900 lawsuits against the United States for the tariffs. And what's going to happen is that Trump will use other legal means by which to get tariffs. That's all. That's what's going to happen. Tariffs are not going to go away. It's just going to be forestalled because everything Trump does, they sue. I mean, I've never seen more lawsuits against any president ever. There's never been more lawsuits against any president ever. Now let's take a look at what they had to say, and I say they because Donald Trump had a presser yesterday, and the Secretary of War had a presser today, as did the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair Raisin Kane. So let's take a look at, I just want to make sure I get this right. Let's play this. No mission creep. Here's Pete Hegseth talking about worries over mission creep. Listen.
You see, this is not 2003. This is not endless nation building under those types of quagmires we saw under Bush or Obama. It's not even close. Our generation of soldier will not let that happen again, and nor will this president, who very clearly ran against those kinds of never-ending, nebulously scoped missions. Those days are dead. Instead, we're winning decisively with brutal efficiency, total air dominance, and an unbreakable will to accomplish the president's objectives.
Okay, so that's Pete Hegseth. That's what he said. We are going to keep this very closely, surgically, in a lockbox of some sort to keep the mission small. Well, this is already a huge mission as it goes. So here is Marco Rubio, Secretary of State.
The goals of this mission are clear, and it's important to continue to remind the American people of why it is that the greatest military in the history of the world is engaged in this operation. It is to destroy the ability of this regime to launch missiles, both by destroying their missiles and their launchers, destroy the factories that make these missiles, and destroy their Navy. The goals of this mission are clear, and it's important to continue to remind the American people of why it is.
It was such a short soundbite. I just put it in there twice, which was fine, except I didn't need it to go twice. Here we have President Trump at his news conference at Doral yesterday, talking about this very thing.
The situation was very quickly approaching. the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me, Marco, so involved, that I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us. And if you notice, they did something which was very foolish, very stupid, I would say. They attacked their neighbors. And their neighbors were largely neutral, or at least weren't going to be involved, and they got attacked. And it had the reverse effect. The neighbors came onto our side and started attacking them, and actually quite successfully. If you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at UAE, Qatar, and others, but they were strong and they were smart, but they got attacked. Nobody, when I first heard it, I said, no, somebody made a mistake. There was no mistake. UAE had over 1,000 missiles shot at it, knocked them almost all down. On the very first day I came down the escalator in 2015, I said, quote, I will stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, and all I'm doing is keeping my promise. Think of that. That was in 2015. I said it. It was a threat then and a much bigger threat now, but no longer a threat, not for a long time anyway. We want to keep it that way. As we continue Operation Epic Fury, we're also focused on keeping energy and oil flowing to the world, and I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply, and if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level. I will take out those targets that were easy and that I mentioned just before. We'll take them out so quickly, they'll never be able to recover, ever. If they want to play that game, they better not play that game. In the long run, oil supplies will be dramatically more secure without the threat of Iranian ships, drones, missiles, nuclear menace, or anything. So the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain safe. We have a lot of Navy ships there. We have the best equipment in the world, inspecting for mines. Again, most of their ships are down at the bottom of the sea, but we will hit them so hard that it will not be possible for them or anybody else helping them to ever recover that section of the world if they do anything. In recent years, the regime and its terror proxies have launched attacks on hundreds of commercial vessels. We're putting an end to all of this threat once and for all, and the result will be lower oil prices, oil and gas prices for American families. We've done that. We've done it. We brought it very low. This was just an excursion into something that had to be done. We're getting very close to finishing that, too. In the meantime, during this brief disruption, the United States is offering political risk insurance to any tankers operating in the Gulf. So we're putting up risk insurance. We'll perhaps go alongside of them for protection. We don't think it'll be necessary. If it is, and if they do anything, the price will be incalculable. It will be so great that they will have wished they never did it, because you have to keep the straits flowing. With all of that, it affects us.
Does anyone deny that the oil still needs to flow? Does anyone deny that? No, because energy is production. Production means people are in a gainful employment. That's what happens. If you have oil, if you have energy, you have production of all kinds, of every manner of pursuit. And it means freedom. That's what it means. That's my personal opinion. What's yours?
Other countries, much more than it does the United States. It doesn't really affect us. We have so much oil. We have tremendous oil and gas, much more than we need. We have Venezuela now as our new partner, great partner. They've worked out so wonderful. We're working with the administration, the president, and it's a massive source of oil, gas, everything. But we're in a very good position, but very unfair to other parts of the world, like China as an example. I mean, we're doing this for the other parts of the world, including countries like China. They get a lot of their oil through the straits, So we're doing this. We have a very good relationship with President Xi in China. I'm going there in a short period of time, and we're protecting the world from what these lunatics are trying to do, and very successfully.
Okay, so there he is about that. And one more thing I wanted to make sure, a couple things. This is Charles Payne, who's the business reporter, one of many business reporters for Fox Business. And he laid it out for what is really happening to the Straits of Hormuz.
It was 298. Today is at 3.47, and a year ago it was 309. So
these are gas prices brought up, and that's the morning host talking to Charles Payne and bringing up gas prices, which, of course, I just want you to note for the record that Democrats are complaining about gas prices. Democrats have instituted some of the highest gas prices in the country. In fact, the highest gas prices in the country. And I'll prove it to you right now. Because of all of their regulations that they put. People say, oh, yeah, those oil companies, they're so greedy. Well, who's really greedier? Look at that. State of Washington. Look at this. Most of the cost for a gallon of gas goes to the greedy Washington state regulators. Most of the cost of a gallon of gas goes to the greedy Democrats running the state of California. Most of the cost of a gallon of gas is going to the greedy government Democrats of Oregon and Montana and Idaho. These are places that charge more for taxes than the gas and oil companies do. Just a reminder. Just a reminder. Okay, back to Charles Payne to talk about the Straits of Hormuz. And I will do that as soon as I find him. Oh, here he is again. Right on.
At the pump.
I think the big move in oil will come when the strait is open. Rich alluded to the Strait of Hormuz. And I think that's a 1-2 punch. The administration is working on. Right now, this is about insurance, believe it or not. This is not about Iran controlling anything. This is about Lloyd's of London pulling insurance and 7 smaller insurance companies following their lead, which is, it's kind of crazy. But it opens the door for us to have insurance as a backstop and have we have 2, we have the Ford, the Gerald Ford and another carrier group out there. So I say in about a week, we'll be able to control that. When you start seeing ships go through the strait, you're going to see oil prices come down precipitously. In the meantime, to your point, there are a lot of options, potential options for the White House. Some people have talked about price controls, which would be absolutely nuts. Some have talked about, export controls for us. That would just be a minor thing. And then the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, here's the problem with that. You could release 200 million barrels, which would be about 10 days of Middle East oil for us, and the price will come down. In fact, G7 nations, Japan and others, also talking about releasing 400 million for temporary relief. But we don't have an oil problem. And I think that, Secretary Wright was trying to explain that. This is all speculation. This is all, you can almost argue, manipulation. This is what they call geopolitical risk. There's no formula for it. It could be an extra $10, it could be an extra $20, it could be an extra $30. So when you have a move like that, that's not based on fundamentals per se, it could be parabolic, which it is, through the roof. But when parabolic moves like that die down, they usually come down just as fast.
Okay. So that's Charles Payne talking about the prices of oil. Here's something to remind people. Just, I know that a lot of people prefer not to, especially in our chat. I have a lot of lefties. And I'm really grateful that you're here. I really am. And but I'm not excited about the anti-Semites, gotta say. Just anti-Christians and anti-Semites. You guys can stay away. Be that as it may, here we go. This is the cost of a gallon of gas, or oil prices, I should say, in 2022. They were higher under the Biden administration. In 2022, who's president? Joe Biden. Now, I know Joe doesn't remember that he presided over the highest oil prices in perhaps even history, but he did. $120 a barrel is what he presided over. And why did he do that? Because he was trying to bring down prices, as we all want to bring down prices for upcoming election. Thing is that he had so far outspent and overspent the U.S. into a fiscal black hole that it caused on-fire inflation. So what he did was he then tapped out the strategic oil reserve and spent that which Trump had filled, and Joe emptied it. And now Trump's got it halfway filled again. He was a bad president. You think Trump's bad? You ain't seen nothing. Go back. Do your research. Go back. Unbelievable. So people don't remember because they don't want to remember. Here is Dan Kane. He is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
The Secretary said we're in the 10th, moving into the 11th day of Operation Epic Fury. The Joint Force remains focused on 3 military objectives. Continue to destroy Iranian ballistic missiles and drone capability in order to prevent attacks on the U.S. and others throughout the region. And this means attacking launch sites, command and control nodes, stockpiles before they can threaten our personnel, our facilities, and our partners. Second, we continue to strike the Iranian Navy and their capabilities in order to do things like sustain movement through the Straits of Hormuz. And third, we continue to start working on and going deeper into Iran's military and industrial base in order to prevent the regime from being able to attack Americans, our interests, and our partners for years to come and project power outside their borders. This means servicing production facilities, research and development sites, and infrastructure. Let me turn to the map. We're going to try digital today to prevent laser injury. Since our last update, CENTCOM continues to make progress across the southern flank. To date, they've struck more than 5,000 targets. U.S. Strategic Command bombers recently dropped dozens of 2,000-pound GPS penetrating weapons on deeply buried missile launchers across the southern flank. We also have struck several one-way drone factories to get at the heart of their autonomous capability. And of course, alongside our regional partners along the southern flank, continue to execute intercepts against one-way attack drones using fighters and attack helicopters. Our strikes mean we've made significant progress in reducing the number of missile and drone attacks out of Iran. Ballistic missile attacks continue to trend downward, 90% from where they've started, and one-way attack drones have decreased 83% since the beginning of the operation. A testament to our air defenders and our air defense systems, and as I said, our partners in the region continue to do great work as well. Second, we're making substantial progress towards destroying the Navy. In the first 10 days of the conflict, we're more than 50 Iranian naval ships into the campaign using a combination of artillery, fighters, bombers, and sea-launched missiles. As Admiral Cooper noted last Thursday, we struck and sank an Iranian drone carrier ship, and U.S. CENTCOM continues today to hunt and strike mine-laying vessels and mine storage facilities. This work will continue. Third, against our objectives, we've begun.
This work will continue. Yeah, we sank another boat, and it just sounds funny. And this work will continue.
Target Iran's military and industrial complex, again, focusing on centers of gravity to get upstream of the shooters out in the field in order to deny them the ability to continue to generate those one-way attack drones.
Okay. Plenty more to, include, but that pretty much, we've talked about a lot of the major, happenings in Iran, and then the second and third order effects. What I'm interested in is the next time we get together on this issue, I want to talk about the desalination plants and how that is going, because there is concern that there have been some that have been hit. Don't know yet. So there you go. People are still arguing about the price of gas in the comments. Before the war, gas was less than $2 only. California above $5. Yeah. Well, I bought gas, or I was in a car. Somebody bought gas. It was like $2.64 for regular. I think that was, or was that premium? It was just nothing. It was comparatively speaking negligible than the West Coast, West Coast, which is where I live on the West Coast, and it's just unrelenting. Their environmental policies and regulations, and the efforts by which Gavin Newsom has taken to getting rid of oil and gas in the state of California, which as a result, Gavin Newsom has to import oil from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and other places. Now, if you're doing something because you want to help the environment, and your idea of helping the environment is buying oil halfway across the world and taking all the hits, that environmental hits that they may portend for the atmosphere, since you think we're all going to die in 9 years or whatever, then why wouldn't you just do it with more rigorous regulatory standards in California, where you have more control over it? And they're sitting on a pot of gold. Why wouldn't you do that? Because it's not as sexy. Because it's not about the climate. It's about constraining people and making them less free. I think that's really what the end game is, being able to control the population. That's why they've done this. Yeah. California has a higher cost of living because of the big population. Oh, please. You're supposed to... Oh, come on. The more population you have, the cheaper it's supposed to be. Isn't that the way it is? You know what? Listen. California, when the California Doge gets in there and starts unraveling some of this stuff, which is what one of the gubernatorial candidates is doing right now, and finding out, you know where some of the biggest amounts of graft have come from? The environmental programs. This is the solar panel industry that are coming from China, by the way. Most of that money to put solar panels on different housing units haven't been put on in solar panels on housing units. It's been paying off their lefty NGOs and nonprofits that are in the pipeline to get the money. That's where that money's going. That's where that money is going. And then you add that to $24 billion of missing amounts of money into the homeless industrial complex. It's the same thing. NGOs making all of their friends who started NGOs to get in the pipeline, to get grants. You know, it's the same thing that we see that happened with the DHS. That's one of the reasons Kristi Noem's gone. Just because she spent so much money on this ad campaign, which, you know, I understand some of that is for buying time. Got it. I understand that's very expensive. But the thing is that you cannot have newbie organizations. DHS apparently went with some new organizations that just happened to be run by people she knew or what have you, or 2 degrees of separation or whatever it was. It's a bad look. It's really a bad look. Don't do what they're doing. Do it the right way. Don't cheat. Gal, I'm going to bring it up next week because I meant to bring it up today, but the Pentagon overspending on furniture, just like they do every year, every doggone year. Well, I expect better from Donald Trump. Okay, I do. I expect more from him instead of, you know, these great, wonderful, huge, nice pieces and fancy chairs. What happened to the other ones that they just bought last year? Okay, not okay. And I get why Charles Goyette says, hey, man, you know, we got to tie it up. We got to stop the spending. Yes, completely agree. Completely agree. That campaign, that ad campaign, I loved it. I mean, I thought it was great, but then I find out it's $250 million. Good God. Anyway, well, let's see. How do you have a climate crisis CO2 level at blah, 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 less than half of one? Yeah, well, they're making it up. It's not actually partnered. Global warming isn't actually partnered with CO2. It is not a precursor. It is a follower of higher temperatures. And why do we have higher temperatures? It depends on what the sun's doing and all other kinds of things portending from that. Because they can't control you. I know. Do I sound crazy? It's a really an issue of control and graft and money. Give me money, give me money. The only way we could do it, like if you stop and think about it, and I know I have to go, but if you stop and think about it, I've seen a meme about this, and it's just so spot on. And it's this. It's like, well, we're going to die in 9 years because of global warming. I know, let's solve the problem. Let's charge everyone more taxes. That'll solve. No, see? No, it doesn't actually. I'm not insane. You're insane for thinking I'm insane. Yeah, Trump fired her. Well, she's helping with something else. Yeah, Christie did buy a jet. Well, I guess the DHS bought a jet. Good God. I don't sound crazy. Learn some science? I did. And you should know that if you're like Mr. Science. Shouldn't you know that? Yes, you sound crazy and very uneducated. Oh, okay. So to what extent am I uneducated about the global warming issue? Go ahead. Right now. Chop, chop. Go ahead. Right now in the comments section. Right now. You're not going to write down what's going on and the graft and the cheating and the lies about global warming and or whatever we're calling it this week. You know why? Because nobody really in public life really understands, because it's based on factual inaccuracies. We'll have to play that one video recently. Thank you. And with that, somebody's saying I'm right. We're going to go. Now, Thursday is Epstein Thursday, and we are going to do the best of Ghislaine Maxwell. We're also going to do a deep dive into the Trump stuff because, one of the persons that I've really come to actually respect a lot in this whole thing, I love that Mike Benz. He's great. Perspective on what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. In addition to that, Michael Tracy's been pretty interesting. I don't know everything he said, and he might be as crazy as I am. I don't know. But I at least appreciate the fact that he's more fair than other people. And so we'll get into the, different ways in which the Trump connections go. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're doing. That's happening on Thursday. So I got a lot of homework to do. Yes. Thank you. I fully agree with your take on environmental issues. Yeah. It's been lie after lie after lie, guys. Yeah. If global warming were true, why aren't we underwater? Isn't that what they promised us? Oh, let's see. A couple more. We are exactly where we were in our atmosphere as we were 1,000 years ago. By the way, bring on the warmer weather. I like it much better. People thrive in warmer weather and they die in cooler weather. We are exactly where we are in our atmosphere. Oh, I already played that. Sorry about that. Climate change is a hoax, a real scam to steal money. I think that's exactly right. Oh, thank you. This is prettier than Barbara Streisand. Oh, well, that's using better filters, I guess. Okay. All right. Epstein Thursday. See you then. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. We do not take you for granted. We appreciate every single person who tunes in every week to listen and watch this program. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, live streaming on Rumble, and then on every other podcast platform shortly thereafter when we can port it over and get it over there as soon as we can. All the shows can be found at victoriataft.com, where the censorship regime has been banned by me. Follow me on social media at these names: Victoria Taft, the Adult in the Room podcast, and the Victoria Taft Show. Send media inquiries, or any others for that matter, to victoria@victoriataft.com. And here's a big ask. Would you please subscribe, share, like, comment, recommend and give this program a 5-star rating where you can. We really appreciate it. We do not take that for granted either. Follow my work at, you guessed it, victoriataft.com. PJ Media, I write tons over there. Flamingo Audiobooks, and of course the radio. I don't do this alone. This show is produced and engineered by Overall Media. 1A Cast is responsible for some of the Adult in the Room podcast's imaging. Logo design by Hageman Creative. The Adult in the Room podcast is produced at Flamingo Road Studios. All rights reserved.